When the old mansion was renovated and transformed into a luxury hotel, the entire town was thrilled. The mansion, built at the end of the 19th century, had always been a local landmark but had been abandoned for decades, shrouded in stories of tragedies and mysteries. The new owners invested millions to restore the building to its former glory, adding modern amenities without sacrificing its historical charm. The result was a hotel that quickly became a sought-after destination for tourists and visitors. The hotel opened its doors with great pomp and circumstance, and it soon became known for its elegance and impeccable service. However, there was one room that, though offered to guests like any other, soon began to gain a dark reputation: room 311. Initially, the hotel staff paid little attention to complaints from some guests about nightmares and strange sensations while staying in the room. But then, the disappearances began. The first disappearance was discreet. A businesswoman staying in room 311 for a conference never showed up for the event and was reported missing. Her car remained in the parking lot, and all her belongings were intact in the room, but she was nowhere to be found. At first, the police treated the case as a possible voluntary disappearance. But when others began to disappear in the same room, the situation changed. Within a few months, 3 guests vanished without a trace, all staying in room 311. The investigations led nowhere, and the only thing the missing had in common was the room they were staying in. The hotel staff began to grow nervous, and some refused to enter room 311. The managers tried to keep the incidents quiet to avoid alarming other guests, but the news eventually leaked, and the room soon gained a reputation for being cursed. Desperate to understand what was happening, the hotel owners began to comb through the mansion's old records. They discovered that room 311 had been permanently closed in the 1920s after a series of family tragedies occurred within that same space. The stories varied, but all involved mysterious deaths and inexplicable events. When the mansion was renovated, the room was reopened and designated like any other, without anyone knowing of its dark past. With the disappearances becoming public and the hotel's reputation at risk, the owners decided to take action. First, they hired private investigators to try to discover what might be happening in room 311. The initial investigations focused on possible rational explanations: kidnapping, voluntary escape, or even structural issues that could cause someone to fall or get lost within the old mansion's walls. However, none of these theories panned out. The investigators searched room 311 from top to bottom. They used advanced equipment to detect any secret passages, hidden holes, or spaces between the walls, but found nothing that could explain the disappearances. The room seemed absolutely normal, with no hiding places or hidden mechanisms. The doors and windows were intact, and there were no signs of forced entry. It was as if the people simply evaporated. When conventional investigations failed, the owners turned to paranormal experts. Parapsychologists, mediums, and supernatural investigators were called to the hotel to try to understand what was happening. The teams installed surveillance cameras in and around the room, hoping to capture any abnormal activity. However, the recordings resulted in more questions than answers. Every night, like clockwork, the security cameras installed in the hallways near room 311 would shut off automatically at exactly 3:11 a.m. The technicians checked the systems and found no logical explanation for what was happening. Additionally, the recordings showed an enigmatic figure, a vague shadow, slowly moving through the hallways during the early hours. The figure always seemed to disappear near the door of room 311, as if drawn there. The historical records that the owners had found indicated that room 311 had been the scene of a series of tragedies in the 1920s when the mansion was still a private residence. The family living there suffered several mysterious deaths, all occurring around that room. After the last tragedy, the room was sealed and kept closed for decades until the hotel renovation. These discoveries only deepened the mystery. Every new investigation, every new attempt to uncover the truth, seemed to bring more doubts and questions. No satisfactory explanation emerged, and the shadow captured in the recordings only fueled speculation that something very wrong was happening there. What was that figure? Could it be a ghost, a manifestation of past tragedies, or something even more sinister? The unease surrounding room 311 continued to grow, and the hotel began to lose customers. The disappearances and unanswered investigations began to drive guests away, and the hotel, once luxurious and thriving, now carried a stigma difficult to erase. The owners, already desperate, decided to take drastic measures. They closed room 311 again, just as had been done in the 1920s. However, the enigma of the room had not been resolved. and some believed that without answers, the mystery would continue to haunt the hotel. Before sealing the room forever, one last attempt was made to uncover what was really happening there. A renowned medium, known for his ability to communicate with spirits, was called to conduct a séance in the room. The medium arrived with a team of assistants and immediately felt a heavy presence in the air. He said there was something ancient and powerful in that room, something that did not belong to the world of the living. During the séance, the medium began to channel what he believed were the voices of the lost souls connected to room 311. The atmosphere grew cold, and the assistants reported feeling a deep unease as the medium spoke in unknown tongues. Suddenly, he stopped and, in a somber voice, declared that the room was a passage, a meeting point between our world and another, where souls trapped between life and death tried to escape their torment. The revelation was disturbing. The medium explained that the tragedies that occurred in the room in the 1920s had opened this passage, creating a kind of portal that attracted vulnerable people or those in emotional distress. These people, upon entering the room, were somehow captured by this energy and disappeared, their souls trapped on the other side, unable to return. The guests who had disappeared over the months had been taken by this mysterious force. The owners, though skeptical of paranormal phenomena, could not ignore the obvious pattern. They decided to permanently close room 311, sealing the door with bricks and removing any reference to it from the hotel's records. The room became a local legend, and the hotel, still standing, began to attract a new type of clientele: the curious, paranormal investigators, and ghost hunters, all trying to unravel the mystery that no one had been able to solve. Despite attempts to forget room 311, the story continued to circulate, and many claim that it is still possible to hear inexplicable sounds coming from where the room used to be, especially around 3:11 a.m. Some believe that the passage is still open, waiting for its next victim, while others say that the shadow captured on the cameras continues to wander the hallways, eternally trapped between two worlds. And so the mystery of the mansion of the disappeared remains, a dark enigma that resists the passage of time. My name is Daniel, and until recently, I was a promising young artist. My works, which mixed urban realism with surrealistic touches, began to draw attention in the city's art scene. After years of struggle, I had finally achieved something every artist dreams of: a major exhibition in a respected gallery. It was my chance to showcase my work to the world and hopefully launch my career once and for all. I spent weeks preparing for this exhibition. Every detail was carefully planned, from the selection of works to their arrangement in the gallery. The night before the opening, I was in my studio, finishing one last piece. It was something different from my usual work, darker, more introspective. As I painted, I felt a strange sense of discomfort, as if I were being watched. But I ignored it, attributing it to stress and the pressure to deliver something exceptional. I finished the painting in the early morning, exhausted but satisfied with the result. It was disturbing, a distorted depiction of a deserted street with obscure figures and details that seemed alive, even in the stillness of the canvas. I placed the piece among the others I would take to the gallery the next day and went home, eager for the big night. However, I never made it to my own exhibition. That morning, my friends, the gallery, everyone tried to contact me, but I didn't respond. My phone was off, and no one knew where I was. The studio was locked from the inside but empty, as if I had simply vanished. The gallery decided to open the exhibition without me, hoping I would show up, but I never did. The news of my disappearance spread quickly, and soon everyone was talking about the young artist who disappeared the night before his big debut. People who saw the exhibition reported something strange about my works. They seemed different, as if they had been altered overnight. New elements had appeared in the paintings, dark and almost imperceptible details that hadn't been there before. The final piece, the one I finished in the early morning, was the most enigmatic of all. Something about it seemed to tell a story that no one could understand. When the gallery doors opened on the night of my exhibition, the atmosphere was charged with a strange energy. Everyone expected to see the rising young artist, but instead, they were faced with a disturbing mystery. My works were there, carefully arranged as planned, but something seemed different. There was a subtle discomfort in the visitors walking through the galleries, a feeling that the paintings were more alive, more unsettling, than anything I had shown before. The first to notice the changes was an art critic who had followed my work from the beginning. He approached one of the paintings, a nighttime urban scene with ghostly figures in the distance, and noticed something strange. There was a new element in the painting, a hooded figure that hadn't been present the last time he had seen the work. The detail was small, almost imperceptible, but it caused a deep sense of unease. Other visitors began to notice similar changes in the other works. The colors seemed darker, the details sharper, and there was a new sense of urgency and despair in the images. The final piece, the one I had finished in the early morning before my disappearance, became the center of attention. It was different from all the others. The painting depicted a deserted street, lit only by a dim light, and in the background, a hooded figure, almost indistinct, observed the scene. The most disturbing, however, was the feeling that the figure was moving within the painting, changing position depending on the viewer's angle. Some people claimed to have seen the figure getting closer, as if trying to leave the painting. In addition to the visual changes, something even stranger began to happen. People reported hearing low whispers while observing the works, as if the figures in the paintings were trying to communicate. The whispers were incomprehensible, but deeply disturbed those who heard them. There was a growing sense that the paintings were telling a story, but a story that no one could fully decipher. Soon, rumors began to circulate that I was still alive, but somehow trapped inside the works. These theories were fueled when a group of keen fans discovered small codes hidden in the paintings. They were like coordinates, numbers, and symbols that, when analyzed, seemed to point to specific locations in the city and dates. These codes led some to believe that I was trying to leave clues about what had happened to me. As the days passed, more people claimed to see hooded figures wandering the streets at night, painting murals that disappeared before dawn. These figures were never captured by security cameras, but their ephemeral works contained the same mysterious codes found in my paintings. The entire city began to wonder, had I really disappeared, or was I trying to communicate from somewhere beyond understanding? As weeks went by, the anxiety and mystery surrounding my disappearance and my works only grew. Art experts, amateur cryptographers, and even investigators pored over the clues left in the paintings and in the ephemeral murals that continued to appear on the city streets. The coordinates, numbers, and encoded symbols formed a puzzle that seemed impossible to solve. The final piece, the one I had finished in the early morning before disappearing, contained an encrypted message that puzzled everyone. It wasn't visible to the naked eye, but it was discovered by chance when a gallery visitor, taking a photo with flash, noticed a peculiar glow on the painting's surface. Upon examining the enlarged image, they realized there were words hidden beneath the layers of paint, only visible under intense light. The message, when finally deciphered, was unsettling. "Find me where the shadow dissolves into light." The phrase, enigmatic and poetic, seemed to reference a specific place, but no one could determine exactly where. Some believed it was a metaphor, suggesting that I had transcended to a dimension beyond human comprehension, while others were convinced it was a literal clue, indicating a physical location in the city. Groups of people began gathering at night, scouring the streets for murals that might contain more clues. They followed the coordinates and analyzed the symbols, hoping to find the place where the shadow dissolves into light. Some even claimed to have seen the hooded figure in the distance, watching them as they tried to solve the enigma. The figure, whom everyone believed to be me, never approached, but its presence was felt, like a silent guide. Finally, on a cold night, a group of amateur investigators made a surprising discovery. They found a small alley, almost hidden between two old buildings, where a street lamp partially illuminated the darkness. On the ground was a mural that seemed to melt into the light, and beside it, a rusty metal door. Forcing it open, they discovered it led to an abandoned basement. Inside the basement, they found what appeared to be an old art studio, with brushes, paints, and canvases scattered everywhere. In the center of the studio was one last painting, still incomplete, depicting the hooded figure. It was as if the studio had been abandoned in haste, and the feeling that I might have been there recently was undeniable. However, there was no sign of where I might be now. The encrypted message had led to the studio, but the questions remained. Was I trying to complete something? Or had I left everything behind on purpose, knowing I was about to be found in another way? The discovery only intensified the mystery, and the story of the disappearing artist became an urban legend. Some say that from time to time, new murals still appear on the streets, suggesting that I continue to create, trapped between two worlds, searching for a way out that no one else can see. It was a perfect day for flying. The sky was clear, with few clouds and a light breeze. As a pilot, I've always been extremely cautious about weather conditions, and that day, nothing indicated that anything could go wrong. The private plane, a reliable and well-maintained model, was prepared for the short flight from a rural town to a nearby coastal city. We had 5 passengers on board, all eager to reach their destination and enjoy the weekend by the sea. The passengers were a mix of friends and acquaintances. There was a honeymooning couple, a businessman heading to a conference, a young woman visiting family, and a journalist who would use the trip to rest after an intense report. Everyone chatted animatedly as I performed the final checks before takeoff. Everything was in order, and soon we were in the air, smoothly gliding through the skies. The first few hours of the flight were uneventful. The plane was stable, and the atmosphere inside the cabin was relaxed. The passengers settled in, some reading, others chatting or taking photos of the landscape below. I maintained regular contact with the control tower, confirming that we were on course and on schedule. There was absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. Then, at some point, I noticed something strange. The radio, which had been perfectly clear, began to fail, emitting static at irregular intervals. I tried adjusting the frequencies, but the problem persisted. I looked at the navigation instruments and noticed that the needles were starting to oscillate slightly, something I had never seen before. However, the plane continued to fly normally, and there were no signs of mechanical failure. I sent a final transmission to the control tower, reporting that everything was fine, but I mentioned the static on the radio as a precaution. Strangely, the static disappeared as soon as I finished the transmission, and the flight continued in absolute silence. I looked back at the passengers, and they all seemed calm, completely unaware that something was starting to go wrong. That was the last time I had contact with the outside world. From that point on, the flight took a turn that no one could have predicted. I never imagined that would be the last time anyone would hear from us. When the scheduled arrival time passed with no sign of the plane, the first concerns began to arise. The families of the passengers and I, the pilot, were anxiously waiting at the small coastal town's airport. As the hours passed and no communication was established, anxiety turned into palpable fear. Authorities were quickly notified, and search and rescue operations were launched. Helicopters flew over the plane's planned route, while ground teams scoured remote areas for any sign of the missing aircraft. The media covered the incident non-stop, and theories began to emerge, ranging from unexpected mechanical failures to sudden adverse weather conditions. However, those who knew us felt something didn't add up. The conditions had been perfect, and the aircraft was in excellent condition. The families of the passengers and I went through an emotional roller coaster. With each new day without news, hope diminished a little more. Vigils were held, and support groups were formed to comfort one another during this agonizing period of uncertainty. The lack of wreckage or any clue only heightened the mystery and despair. How could a plane simply disappear without a trace? Months passed without any significant progress. Then, on a cold winter's day, a team of climbers reported finding the wreckage of a plane in a mountainous region far from the original route. The coordinates were immediately sent to authorities, who confirmed it was our missing aircraft. The news quickly spread, reigniting the pain and curiosity about what had really happened on that fateful day. Upon arriving at the site, investigators were baffled. The plane was relatively intact, with no obvious signs of a violent crash. Inside the cabin, all the passengers' personal belongings were in place, as if they had been left in a hurry. There were no bodies, no signs of struggle or emergency evacuation. It was as if everyone had simply disappeared into thin air, leaving behind only the deafening silence of the mountains. Upon entering the plane's cabin, investigators were confronted with a scene that was both unsettling and incomprehensible. The passenger seats were intact, and the seatbelts were not fastened, suggesting that no one was strapped in at the time the plane landed or crashed. It was as if the passengers had simply stood up and walked away, but to where? And how? The luggage and personal belongings were organized, some bags still open, as if they had been left in haste, but without any sign of struggle or panic. The plane's control panel showed no signs of technical failure. All the instruments appeared to be functioning until the moment the plane touched down on the mountain. The flight logs, the flight diaries, and the navigation instruments were normal, with no evidence of malfunction. Everything indicated that the plane had veered off course, but the reason why remained a complete mystery. No explanation made sense. However, what really intrigued the investigators was a map found in the cabin, partially hidden under the co-pilot's seat. The map, apparently hand-drawn, showed a completely different route from the one we were supposed to take. Marks made with a pen indicated a destination in a remote area, far beyond our original destination. Beside these marks were handwritten notes with words and symbols that no one could fully decipher. The analysis of the map raised even more questions. Who had drawn that route? Was it an alternative plan? And why had no one been informed about it? The presence of the map suggested that, at some point, someone on board had decided to change the flight's course, but there was no clear evidence of who might have done it or why. The most disturbing hypothesis was that this decision might have been made without the passengers' knowledge or consent. Theories began to emerge, ranging from the involvement of some inexplicable phenomenon to the possibility that the passengers were fleeing from something or someone. But without any witnesses or concrete evidence, the case remained a mystery. The story of the ghost flight was widely publicized, capturing the imagination of many but leaving the families and friends of the missing with no answers. The empty cabin, the enigmatic map, and the absence of any sign of life became symbols of one of the greatest aviation mysteries. And so, the story of the ghost flight became a legend, a haunting reminder that not all mysteries have a solution.